Hello, orchid lovers. I'm Roland Cook. I'm speaking from São Paulo, Brazil. And to start this series of videos with tutorials and growing tips on orchids, we're going to start with the Vandas. Uh, I am a great fan of Vandas. They're among the most beautiful orchids, and they grow very easily. They flower several times a year. Beautiful plants, as long as you have the right climatic conditions and with warmth and humidity. They're pretty easy to grow. But we have to pay attention to a couple of things. So I'll be making a series of about 4 or 5 videos, and we'll talk about Vandas. How I grow my Vandas. I don't know if that applies to everybody in the US, in Europe, other places. But that's how I grow my Vandas here in Brazil. And I'll show you how I do it, and I'll show you the results. I think I have a pretty good collection of Vandas, and they grow very well. So let's have a look at it. Okay. First of all, you have to keep in mind that Vandas are a group of orchids that are native to Southeast Asia. They come from Thailand, India, and a couple of other countries in Southeast Asia. And for the most part, they need and they grow in a very warm and very moist, very humid environment. The only exception to the rule is a species called Vanda cerulea, the blue Vandas. It grows more in higher altitudes, mostly in India, and so it grows in somewhat cooler environments. But as a general rule, most or all Vandas need high temperatures and high humidity levels to stay healthy. So you have to keep that in mind. And also, in their native countries, these plants get lots of light, more light than is necessary for cattleyas, more light than is necessary for almost any other orchids. Some people in tropical climates grow Vandas in full sun. I don't do that here because the plants, they tend to get a bit yellowish on the leaves, and they dry out too fast. So I grow them under agricultural plastic, and they grow fine in that manner. They also live in a climate that is very humid. It rains almost every day. And if anyone has taken a trip to Bangkok or to another place where they grow Vandas for export, you'll see that they grow these Vandas almost on a lake, you know, and with water, lots of water, and they water these plants almost every day. It rains almost every day, and they wet these plants almost every day. So Vandas need high temperature and high humidity, more than water on its roots and leaves. It needs humidity in the air. So if you intend to grow Vandas at home or in your orchid collection, keep that in mind. It's difficult to grow Vandas in cold climates. You're growing Vandas in Minnesota, you're going to have a huge problem. It's just too cold for the Vandas. What Vandas do when they are grown in cooler climates, they grow slowly. They just don't develop very well. And also, they need lots of light, much light. Okay, and sometimes that is difficult to obtain in a place where you have a long winter, and especially if you have to grow your plants indoors. Vandas are not plants to be grown indoors. They don't just don't they don't like that. Okay, so but they are beautiful plants. You know, you let me see one of here. Look at this. This is wonderful. You know, and this is the first time first time blooming seedling. It's grown. This plant is about 6, 7 years old, and it's really beautiful. And the flowers last a long time, something like 30, 40 days each flower. It gets lots of flowers, and when this flowering spike ends, after a few months it'll come out with another one. Okay, so it's a very nice, very beautiful plant to have in the collection, as long as you have the necessary conditions to grow Vandas. If you live in Florida, wow, that's fantastic. But that's Florida, okay? Okay, so you have, when you start thinking about Vandas, you have to keep in mind that you must have the right climate for that. Okay, it's an easy plant to grow, but it's picky on the places where it grows well. Okay, so that's the basic information about Vandas. Another thing about Vandas, you'll notice that the Vandas, they're monopodial plants. They grow in one direction. They grow up, and they don't usually give out growths to the side. Sometimes they do that, but usually they grow in one direction only. So that's important to keep in mind too. Another thing, when you buy a Vanda, and this is the really important part about growing Vandas, when you buy one of these plants, I don't know exactly how it goes in the US and Europe, but here in Brazil, when people sell Vandas at flower shops and at the nurseries, they sell them in this, like, you know, just like they get them from, they import all these plants from Thailand, and they sell them exactly in the same way that they got them from the foreign country. So, with out of pots, with a very small plastic basket like this one, with all the roots exposed to the air. Some people like to say, no, Vandas are air plants. They're not air plants. They're just an ordinary orchid. They don't like being enclosed in a pot. Okay? So you'll buy your Vandas, most of the time, you'll buy them like this. And that's okay, no problem with that. But you have to keep certain things in mind. At the nurseries, Vandas, they get water every day, sometimes twice a day, and they get fertilizer once a week, once every 10 days. So they're in ideal conditions for these plants. When you get one of these plants and take it to your home and try to grow it along with your cattleyas, then you're in trouble. Because cattleyas you grow in plastic pots or in baskets or in clay pots or anything like that. And you'll buy this Vanda without that pot. And if you don't care for this plant in the right way, after a few months, it'll start looking like this. It's still got lots of roots, and sometimes it's even flowering again, but the plant starts losing all its lower leaves, like this. This one. It starts looking like a palm tree. Okay? And this is a very sick Vanda. It's almost at the point where you just throw it away. And Vandas aren't cheap. They're not cheap plants. I don't know how much they cost in the U.S., but around here they cost anything from $20 to $100 each. So they're not cheap plants, and it's a shame to pay $100 on a beautiful Vanda like this one, and after a few months just throw the plant out because it starts losing all its leaves, it dries up, and the plant dies. And this is a symptom of a plant that hasn't had enough water, enough humidity around it, and enough fertilizer. So what it does when the plant starts lacking water and food, it sacrifices the older leaves. It starts dropping leaves off, one after the other. Gets yellow, start dropping it off, and the plant starts looking like a palm tree. And this is almost a lost case. So we have to avoid this. This is what we're trying to avoid in our Vanda culture. And there are several ways to do this. Okay? Okay. So, here we are. Let's put this here. Okay, the first thing you have to keep in mind is when you buy a Vanda, when you buy one of these plants, don't look just at the flowers. The flowers are beautiful. Okay, the flowers are what attract everybody's attention. But don't just focus on the flowers. Look at the plant. Take the plant in your hands and look at it from top to bottom. Look at the leaves on the top, the middle, the lower part of the plant. Look at all the roots. You'll see something interesting. When you get a Vanda that comes from Thailand, like this one, you see in a very hot and humid climate like they have in Thailand, Vandas usually develop very thin roots. These thin roots, like this one, they're very thin. And that's okay for the Vanda over there. Once they arrive in a drier climate, what Vandas usually do, they start putting out thicker roots. Like, let's see. Here we are. This is a beautiful Vanda here. Okay, they start putting out these thicker roots like this one. These are the healthy roots. Those very thin roots that come with the plant when they arrive from Thailand, usually they dry up and die. So unless the plant has a good supply of these roots, these new roots, the thicker ones, the chances are this plant is going to start losing its leaves and becoming one of those little palm trees that I showed you. We don't want that. Okay? So the first thing you have to do when you buy a Vanda, take a good look at the plant. Look at its roots. If it doesn't have enough roots, lots of roots, like a waterfall of roots, like this one, look, this is beautiful. If it doesn't have all these roots, better choose another one. Because even though it might be in full bloom and flowering beautiful, chances are you're going to lose that plant sometime. Okay? So look at the roots. Look at all the roots, if they're not broken, if they're all healthy, alive. This is almost a guarantee that this plant has a fair chance of growing well and producing lots of flowers several times a year, and it's going to be a wonderful plant for your collection. Okay, first of all, here we are. Second thing you have to look at. Let me see if I can get something here. Here we are. This is a beautiful Vanda. Let me see. This is a real nice Vanda. Look at that. Huge flowers, beautiful plant. Okay? But you look at the plant and you see that it's already started losing its lower leaves. It's got pretty nice roots, not bad. But at some time, this plant had lack of water or food, and it started sacrificing its lower leaves. It's still growing pretty well. It's growing nicely, no problem with that. It's flowering. And remember that when these plants flower, this flowering, this spike, it takes up a lot of energy from the plant. So the plant has to be really healthy to give a good flowering. Okay? This one is pretty much okay, but you see it's lost these lower leaves and it won't get it back. So this plant will always be, let's say, an ugly plant. It's not a beautiful plant. It's not a well-grown plant. So keep that in mind when you choose your Vandas. Another important thing is when you choose your Vanda, let me show you this one. This is very nice. You see it's growing. It's got all the leaves all the way to the bottom, like this one. That's good. That's fine. And then somewhere in the middle, it's got a leaf that's getting yellow. It's not really a problem. Sometimes Vandas do lose their leaves, one or two. That's not a problem, no matter for concern. But if you can choose another one, don't get this one, because this might be contained just in this leaf. It'll just fall off, but it might not. It might, spread, and then you might have a Vanda that the top portion of the plant dies. And what the plant does to overcome this problem, it starts putting out new shoots from the bottom. So the plant divides, and it's always a weaker plant. So try to choose a plant that has all its leaves from bottom up, and all the leaves are nice and green. Like, let me see, where's this one? This is the beautiful one. It's not even in bloom. You see, this one isn't flowering. It's not in bloom. It'll bloom. Oh, here it is. It's coming. See that? That's nice. That's really beautiful. And it's got lots of roots, beautiful roots, and it's got all its leaves. Look at that. Hasn't lost a single leaf in the last 5 or 6 years. And this is a nice Vanda. This was a Vanda that I would take home easily. Okay? So keep that in mind when you're choosing your Vandas at the flower shop. Okay? Another thing that you should do, just, sort of feel out the leaves of the plant. If those leaves, and I'll show you one, if those leaves are sort of leathery, like, let's see this one. If they're leathery, if they're sort of, more to, sort of leathery, they don't have that texture, that firm substance that well hydrated leaves have. That means that plant is dehydrated. It's lacking, it's feeling lack of water. And even though the plant may have all its leaves, it still is a plant that is that you're running a huge risk of losing this plant because it doesn't have enough roots. See, that's the consequence. It has a few roots. It has some of those little thin roots that came with it from Thailand, put out some new roots, but actually it doesn't have enough roots to sustain this flowering. So actually, it shouldn't really even be left. What I do is this. Yes, cut it off. And then I can recover this plant. Another thing that Vandas do when they don't have enough water, the leaves close. They close up like this. And that's an indicator of a plant that hasn't had enough humidity, enough water, and it's a risky plant. It's a plant that I would not buy anyway. Okay? So keep an eye out for that. Okay, that being said, now on the next video we're going to talk about how to treat your Vandas, how to water them, how to feed them, and what I do with my Vandas to keep them healthy. I don't, you can keep your Vandas like this if you want to, It's not a problem. As long as you have enough humidity, relative humidity in the air, you can keep your Vandas like this. But it's difficult. You have to water these plants every day. You're never going to go on vacation anymore because you have to stay there and water your plants every day. But there's a way to overcome this. You can plant these Vandas in a manner that will ensure that these plants get enough water without you having to give them water every day. We'll see that in the next videos. Okay? So, stick around. This is the first one dealing with Vandas with some tips. First, how to buy your Vandas, how to choose your Vandas. If you get them by mail, open the box, take them out of the box, check the plants. If these plants are dehydrated, if they're showing leaves that are obviously drying up, leathery like, I would complain to your supplier. Okay? Don't accept that kind of thing. Okay? So choose your plants wisely, and you have a pretty good chance of having a very healthy and beautiful Vanda collection. Okay? Stick around. If you like these videos, my English isn't really that good. I lived in the States for a few years. When I was a kid, that was about 50 years ago, so it's getting a bit rusty. But I'll try to make myself understood. Okay, so stick around. If you like the videos, you know, you can subscribe to the channel. Press that little bell button so you'll get the new videos as they come out. Okay? We're in the middle. This is April 14th today. We're in the middle of the coronavirus outbreak. So take care. Stay at home if you can. Take care of yourself and your family. And be well. Okay? See you on the next video. Bye-bye.